So we're in the second week of this class, and it's a bit thematically a bit different. I'm going to talk to you today about cryptocurrencies and tomorrow about digital, the central bank issued digital currency that is about to be planned, right? And central bank digital currency, CBDC. They're going to have to find a better name. They will. These are very different types of digital monies. Okay, so I want to separate them in a way. I do this cryptocurrencies today, and then the CBDC in the first hour of tomorrow, and then I'm going to start talking to you about climate finance or sustainable finance, and I'm going to do that in a way by introducing to you tomorrow in the second hour the whole climate change policy regime that started with the Paris Agreement, and of which climate finance is a part. And then Thursdays, I'll talk about what's going on with different dimensions of sustainable finance right now. Okay, so, but for today, I have 2 hours. I want to talk to you first about money. First of all, just about money. And part of the reason why I'm doing this is because I have a slightly different approach than the two major traditions of economists looking at money. And the difference in approach makes a difference. And so it makes a difference to also how I see cryptocurrencies, right? So the way you think about money conceptually and theoretically will get you to very different places, you know? And so how you start thinking about money is actually important. So if I start talking about cryptocurrencies without giving you my context, my overall broader context about how I see money, you're not going to get much, okay? So I want to set the stage for broader thinking about money, because we're changing the money form in a very radical way, and it's going to have important implications. And to me, you know, one part of my approach is the money form is crucial, from which follow all kinds of things. But there are sort of innate problems in a monetary production economy. There are innate problems when you have an economy that's organized around fully monetized activities, okay? And they're not usually captured by the standard approaches of money. Okay? And so I need to kind of introduce to you the idea of money as a social institution. So let me just, I'm going to take out this cosinular. I want to have the middle of the little tiny pieces of chalk. So you have three views of money, right? Roughly speaking. I'm just going to use M for money, right? So you have M as a good. You have M as an asset. And you have M as a social institution. All right? And each of these conceptualizations of money has a certain logic, okay? And from that logic follows a certain view of the economy. Right? And you know, one of the things that immediately struck me when I started to study the history of economic thought, which I did a lot, was that all the economists that I love began with this question about what is money. Marx started like that way, and Keynes started that way. Okay, and those are my two favorite economists, I have to say, right? But this was also true for other economists that I very much appreciated, like Schumpeter or Polanyi. They also have very deep things to say about money. Right? And then my wife, who's a social psychologist, worked with an incredible mind, one of the geniuses of the world called Serge Moscovici, and he wrote a whole book about money as a social psychologist. And so, yes, I said to myself, this is a deep topic, right? And so I've been kind of thinking about it all my life, really. When you take an economics class, 99% of your economics classes are going to be taught by teachers who follow only one and the most simplistic view of money, and that's money as a good. Standard economics thinks of money as a good. Okay. And one implication of that is that once you think of money as a good, of course, you have demand, supply, price. Okay, so that's a big part of the business there, and I'll go there in a minute. But you're also thinking of money as aside, money as separate from the other goods. Okay. And you must argue it such because you want to ultimately separate money out of the economy. Okay. You separate money out of the economy by dividing the economy into two spheres: the nominal sphere, the monetary sphere, which has certain phenomena and certain prices like the exchange rate or the inflation rate. These are what we call monetary phenomena, interest rate. And then you have the real world. Okay. Exchange and production. Exchange thereby is not a monetary exchange. It's always conceived in standard economics as if it was barter, with money just as a thing in between, right? As a veil. So there's also this idea of the neutrality of money. Money makes no fucking difference about what's going on in the real economy. That's like a crazy concept. But it is a concept that allows them to have equilibrium. That's the whole point. Standard economics wants to have equilibrium. It wants to have the presumption of an automatically self-balancing system on every level. Micro, it's optimization. Markets, it's demand supply with equilibrium. And then you have general equilibrium analysis. It's like a linear aggregation model. A very smart economist, a new classical economist, understood and said so, Frank Kahn. You would not have equilibrium if money was in the system. Okay. And that's exactly right. Exactly right. When at the moment you have a monetary economy, you have a cyclical process. Okay. That's a totally different type of economic thinking. Do you understand what I'm saying? So this is a very methodically constructed view of the world. And in it, money is a good, it is a stock. Okay, money is always treated as a stock. There's no flow dimension, right? There's no, so you don't have any models that have dynamic qualities of flow. You have comparative static models, okay, from one equilibrium to the next. You don't worry about the process in between. So you basically jump from equilibrium to equilibrium, right? So there's no sense of prices whatsoever. There's no sense of historic time, path dependencies, nothing. This is a very castrated view of an amazingly, potentially violent capitalist economy. Right. So what we call new classical economics is a particular choice of looking at the world, okay? Be clear. It's more ideological than anything else. But it also it's a mixture of ideological and mathematical. Once you have the math and how we mathified economics in the late 19th century, then we also look at certain variables, we teach a certain way, we talk a certain way, and it's an elitist way. You do not want people to understand economics. That's pretty clear. Right? Anyway, I'm just telling you this as a teacher who is forced to teach these textbooks to 18-year-olds who have absolutely no clue about economics. How do you do that? What's your cognitive dissonance, inside of you? Always been an interesting problem for me, right? I've been teaching since I was 23, 48 years ago. I still wonder about how do you teach economics to these guys if you choose a textbook? Second thing, and this came painfully, it's beautiful to watch how Keynes came on his own, right? So let me just finish this. I didn't finish this, right? When you look at money as a good, three things matter: money supply, money demand, and the price of money. Okay? And in the standard, so when you have new classical economics, you also have a subsection for it because money is separated from the real world of exchange and production. So you have a theory of new classical theory that just deals with the monetary egg sitting next to this animal. Okay? And that's the quantitative theory of money, which starts way back, okay? But it gets crystallized as a product of the history of economic thought by David Hume, 1752, little monograph called Off Money. He's the teacher of Adam Smith, right? Their relationship is actually important, but that's a whole other story, right? But in this little subsection of neoclassical economics, the quantitative theory of money, which then later gets transformed into more modern versions when it's called monetarism. And that's Irving Fisher and then Friedman, the Chicago boys, that did a good deal of damage around here. Anyway, for them, the money supply is a stock. Exogenous stock, not part of the economy, determined by an arm of the government called the central bank. Right? So it's a fixed money supply, as if the central bank can control the money supply. The money demand has only one motive. It's the transaction motive of money. You want cash in your pocket because you're going to spend it. And when you spend it, and this is essentially the work of Milton Friedman, okay? You want to spend it, you have a certain predictable pattern of spending it. You have a routinized life. Your bills come due at a certain moment. You go on vacation at a certain moment, right? So you have stable consumption functions and stable behavior, and you have a predictable money demand. That's very important. And it's a constant, it's a constant or at least predictably stable percentage of your income. And there's a lot to it, okay? This is not a stupid way of arguing, right? When you think of your lives, you're too young to really know how brutally boring that's going to be. You're a matter of routines, okay? And you have a certain transaction pattern. You shop at a certain moment around a certain basket of goods and services. You have chapters in your life, but they're just chapters in your life. You become a daddy or a mommy, and suddenly you have like a whole other set of products to worry about, right? The kids then take you from chapter to chapter until they leave, and then you're depressed, and then you buy other things just to deal with your depression. Then you retire, and you're thinking of palm trees, right? But we have chapters, they're predictable. We're quite routinized animals, okay? The advantage of this, okay, is also that this is at the essence of making money just appended onto equilibrium models. Right? This stable view gives you an equilibrium view, not a cycle view, not a crisis view. And so you can kind of make the money demand predictable. That also means, by the way, that its reciprocal is also predictable, the velocity of money, the turnover speed, they're reciprocal, right? If overall everybody asks, we like the economy at large, right? If averaging out, we carry around 1/5 of our income, 20% of our income in cash to spend it on any given day, then the money has to go around 5 times to become 100%. So the velocity would be 5. And this is important because then you have things like the equation of exchange of Irving Fisher, M times V is P times Q, right? And in this equation, which is an accounting identity, that's just 2 different ways of measuring nominal GDP, you can then make that accounting identity of 2 different ways of looking at the GDP, the real way and the monetary field, the 2 spheres are put together, right? You can look at that as turn it into a unicausal relationship from the money supply to the GDP. Are you following me? And then you can just like make GDP more or less dependent on the money supply. Assuming stable money demand, assuming stable velocity. And that's the equilibrium dimension of neoclassical economics. That's the money part of neoclassical economics, okay? Then you just put it in there and you still have equilibrium models. Everything is equilibrium models. It has money in there. No, it doesn't. Money is just put in there like a leech, you know. It's a much more violent social institution than that, I can tell you that. We kill for it. It doesn't sit in those models. Right? But then, you know, in that model, with that equation of exchange, that idea of how you go from a micro to a macro equilibrium fast, there's absolutely no space for major crises. You hear me? It's an equilibrium model. If it's out of whack, it will adjust itself fast. There's no time dimension. It's a quasi-instantaneous adjustment, okay? If it doesn't adjust itself, then it's not the problem of the model, it's the problem of somebody messing with it, like unions or the government. This was not the case from 1929 to 1939. You had basically very small government, illegal unions in the US. That's not the problem. Something else is happening. And so you have Keynes, John Maynard Keynes. We always use his middle name because he also has a famous father economist, John Neville Keynes, who nobody talks about anymore. But, you know, in Keynes' time, there was still a guy, a dad to beat, you know, to get better at. But Keynes was the pupil of Marshall, Alfred Marshall, who is the greatest neoclassical economist of a whole half century. He gives us those demand supply curve things, okay? The Marshallian cross. And then Keynes goes to India and studies Indian currency as a diplomat. He wants to be a diplomat. And he's fascinated by the way money works in India as compared to the US. And also the whole colonial dimension. You get like 2 monetary systems, a British one and the you know, long-standing Indian ones. And so his first book that he writes, he has a whole thesis about probability theory. That's will go also later a book. But the first book as an economist, as a diplomat, as an observer, is called Indian Currency. 1919. Okay. And then he's a diplomat. He goes to the Treaty of Versailles in the British delegation, and he watches these people imposing incredibly impossible reparations on the defeated Germany, and he walks out in protest. That's the end of his diplomatic career, right? He's like 3 years, he's a diplomat. Later on, the idea that he started as a diplomat, that's also how he ends. That's how he gets to Bretton Woods as the head of the British delegation, with plenty of plans, which you should ever make sure to read. And commodity stocks would be pretty important to have thought this through now. Okay. He also has supranational international money, the Banker plan. He has an idea about a World Trade Organization with powers. He had a vision, man. The vision is like for the 21st century, okay? This guy needs to be revived just from the idea of thinking through international governance. Seriously. Okay? So that's what I'm saying. He starts as a diplomat, he ends as a diplomat, but he died young, suddenly. I mean, he always had a bad heart. And he gets there's the whole thing about war, and then Bretton Woods kind of just wipes him out. He dies at the age of 63. You know? But Keynes then writes 5 books about money. They're all different from each other. Seriously. Most people get stuck with the general theory. Of course, that's his biggest contribution. But the real beauty about money is already earlier, right? 1923, Tract on Monetary Reform. And this whole idea of realizing that international capital flows are going to be a messy thing. Okay? And he's looking for an equilibrium, a monetary equilibrium, which becomes this idea of interest parity. And that's in that. Because this is his response to the Genoa Conference of 1922, where for the first time you have direct exchange of currencies. And that means for the first time you have a problem of exchange rates. A new price of money is born. It's an international dimension, right? And in that same year, Gustav Cassel, one of those great Swedish economists, works out purchasing power parity for exchange rates. But that only applies to trade. And Keynes said, listen, Keynes is British, he's in London, right? Or next to it, right? No, there's also capital flows. There's another part of the exchange rate, capital interest parity. Okay. So that's the 23 book. Then in the 30 book, Treatise on Money, it's actually 2 books. Okay. 2 volumes. He's thinking through the idea of a financialized system, a monetized system without the gold standard. And then what it means to still have the gold standard. He has become an enemy of the gold standard, okay? And so he actually has a circuit view of money there in the Treatise on Money. And he hated Marx, but he said to Dennis Robertson in Cambridge, and he wrote a letter, the one thing I love about Marx are his monetary circuits, which I will talk to you about in a minute. And that letter was right around the Treatise on Money. And then he writes the General Theory in 1936 for the Depression. Because what I was before, money is a good, there's no space for depression. So how do you explain a depression? You start with a different view of money. Money as an asset. Okay? Money as an asset. So when money is an asset, it's a financial asset that coexists with other financial assets. It's a bit humid today. I don't see you. Right. And all the other so he crystallizes pretty soon all the other financial assets into one, a bond. So it's money versus bond. Okay. And he wants to figure out how people switch between the two. Okay. And the first question that he has is like, if money has zero yields, you don't earn money on a 100 Reich note. It's going to be the same 100 Reich note a year from now. Okay. If you have a checking deposit, most places you don't earn any interest. If money has zero yield, why do people want it? Right. So it's money is a financial asset without yield, no interest, and bond is an asset with a yield. From which, by the way, he then gets a different theory of interest than the neoclassical theory. Okay. Right. That's also a whole other part of Keynes that you also need to be somewhat aware of, that he has a different view of interest rates than the neoclassicals. But there's one neoclassical economist who is very attached to, who does work beyond the previous realm, a guy called, another great Swedish economist, Knut Wicksell, 1896. That's one of the best books that you will read about interest rates. And here's this whole idea of the natural interest rate, which the central banks of today are still obsessed with. Okay. So Keynes basically works against Wicksell and with Wicksell. Okay. But the idea about this, the money as an asset, is that it has a special quality: liquidity. It represents liquidity. It gives you immediate spending power. That means command in the marketplace. But it also gives you protection. And it gives you the realization of opportunity. And so Keynes gets stuck, beautifully stuck, I have to say, in this idea about working out liquidity preference. That's the essence of his theory of money as an asset. The quality of money as the carrier of liquidity, and the human need for liquidity, the liquidity preference, from which follow different motives of money demand beyond just the neoclassical transaction demand for money. Keynes adds 3 more motives of money demand: precautionary, speculative, I should say speculative and then precautionary, actually, if you look at it as a cycle. So let's go back. Precautionary comes after speculative. Okay. Speculative, precautionary, and then later on, after the Giant Three, 1 year later, in a crucial moment of his own understanding, he adds another motive called the finance motive. So the speculative motive is well, he has a very strange explanation. Okay. His explanation is about anticipation of bond prices. And if you think that so there's this inverse relationship between interest rates and bond prices. And if you think that interest rates will go down and bond prices will go up, then you want to be ready to buy bonds, because then you get a capital gain. But the speculative money demand motive is like, you can make a lot more than that out of that. Okay. That's a whole area we can think about through a lot more stuff. I'm sure of that. But he's stuck because in his model, it's all about switching from bonds to money and back. Okay. So it's a logical consequence that he thinks it through like that. That's what I'm trying to say. But the speculative money demand motive is deeper than that, for sure. It has more than that. And one guy who does think about it a lot is a French guy. Occasionally he writes in English, André Orléans. Okay. Anyway, the precautionary money demand motive is if you anticipate trouble or you're already in trouble, you need to have a cash reserve. You feel like things are going to be bad, you better have some cash. The finance motive is if it's mostly for big businesses, bigger, more likely, but it can also be for an individual. If you want to plan to buy a house, for example, you're saving for a house. The idea is that you're accumulating cash to build up enough of a cash reserve for a major purchase. Okay. And they come in a certain moment of the cycle when you feel confident. So that's when the recovery goes into a boom, when the finance motive comes into being. Okay. That's my theory. That's not what he's saying. But it's in there. When you read this article, you can see, I mean, just in terms of how he embedded it, it's cyclical, right? Keynes already has a pretty good sense of cycles, I have to say. That was one of the things that makes him great. So the other side of this is that the money supply is endogenous. And sometimes in the treatise on money, it's endogenous. In the general theory, it's still exogenous, because he is more interested in the money demand side and the money supply side, and he's more interested in looking at interest rates and figuring out interest rates in this broader macro model. But that gets us to another point, which is that he has two different concepts of interest. And that's exactly this, his struggle between the monetary sphere and the nominal sphere. Okay. But he integrates them differently than the classic economists, but no longer having the automatic equality of savings and investment. So he breaks that apart. That's how he can get to the Great Depression, okay, by breaking them apart. Does it make any sense to you guys? Right. I don't know, because I'm just at some level, I have no idea how much how much you already know anyway about it, okay? Maybe I just bore you. Okay, thank you. So, in the end, he comes back with money, but he doesn't publish this work. I told you already once, and I'm telling you again, go to volume 25 and then also 26 of his collected works, where everything that he wrote over a 5-year period, letters, notes, and memos to government officials, right? It's all in there, but he also has 3 different plans for Banker in there, including the official one, what they call the white paper. That's already 1941. Banker is his idea of an international monetary system after the war, okay? And there you see a whole bunch of other, there is already like, there's a view of money there that's kind of, I always said, I want to be like that, I told you that I got obsessed with Bretton Woods, and then I got into this pretty early in my life, right? So that had a huge impact on me wanting to always be Marxist and Keynesian at the same time. This is a nice tension to have. But there's a bridge between this, several bridges, post-Keynesians, and the one that I ultimately ended up with, which are the regulationists of France, of which André Orléans is one. Not the main one, because he's actually an differently institutional. He has the theory of the convention, so he's an institutionalist. But he goes into bed with the key head of the regulation theorists at the beginning, which is Michel Aliétat, who, thanks to Bruno, who sent me this manuscript, will have a book out called The Future of Money shortly, okay? Which, you should try and read if you read French. Which gets you to the point also where you realize this man is 83 years old. He would be like that. I would like to be like that too. I actually met him when I retired, and he says, so what are you going to do? You're retiring. Let me tell you, do like me, work. You know? But anyway, the key view, which is the third view, is money as a social institution. And the advantage is that already by and of itself is an interdisciplinary and ultimately, hopefully, at one point, transdisciplinary approach to money. You look at the history, you look at the geography, then you get to the hierarchy. You can look at any angle of money you want. But one thing always stands out: it's man-made. It doesn't come like manna from heaven. We make it. We construct it. We let it enter our heads. We kill for it. But if it's a man-made institution, then it also is subject to change, historic change. We can remake it. We can add on things, subtract things. We can face crisis and then realize, well, how do we rebuild it better? Right. And, there's a lot of other non-economists who have thought about money. There's I remember when I was in my sort of radical phase when I was a teenager, Henry Miller. It's like a pornographic book almost, but he writes about money. It's like 6 pages about money there, and they're just incredibly beautiful about how people are obsessed with it. I have to find you the reference. So let me just give you a bit of a sense of what it could mean to think of money as a social institution. Some ideas. So one idea is that you have to think about what are we doing it for? What are we using it for? Right? To organize societies. Where we use it for two different things at the same time, right? And this gets us into relationships between humans and relationships between humans and nature, right? We think of money as a measure of value. We express value in monetary terms. And this doesn't just have to be a price, okay? This can also be the dowry, that allows you to get rid of your daughters. I mean, there's a lot of other, this is like how much the priest wants from you, right? As a sign of your religion. Right? So measure of value is a concept that is like a pretty deep concept, okay? We have to have some kind of consensual notions of what we value and how we value it. But in most instances, you can then derive it in a more narrow way as money as unit of account, money as a standard of prices, okay? But it's more than that. Measure of value is deeper. And then it's also the representative of income, spendable power, command in the marketplace, reward for effort, incentive for effort. Okay? And it is both at the same time, right? Which also means that all our economic activities become monetary circuits. We construct a cash flow economy. We go from a non-cash economy to a fully cash flow economy over centuries. We organize that as we think we advance. And if you impose money like cash crops on poor farmers, they're in a totally different boat, okay? Either they adjust or they don't. If they don't, they're dead. But if you do, you make them differently dependent than before. You go instead of nature, the most important thing, other humans become the most important thing, and that's a different type of farming. So the imposition of cash is a powerful tool of power and of transformation. All right. So when you put them together as the measure of value, and I'm trying this again, I'm kind of pretty blind, I have to tell you. Well, maybe I actually teach better blind because I don't see shit. I don't see shit either. Sorry. Yes, let's do this. I just feel naked. So different, you create monetary exchange. And the whole idea about monetary exchange that really matters, right, is the social validation of your private activity. Okay? You're gonna have to want to get income, you're gonna have to sell the result of your effort. You're not gonna get any income until somebody wants it and is willing to pay. You're not gonna get any income until you get commodified as labor power and somebody wants to hire you with a job. So you embed all humans that are interested in surviving and living into just a web of dependency. At the essence of money is the social validation of your private activity. That's what markets come to mean when they have money in them. Right? Listen, you're going to spend your whole life dealing with this, whether you're a business person or you work for a living. I mean, the social validation can be comfortable, right? I'm socially validated because I'm known to you and you're hiring me, right? For this particular summer, right? That's a very good social validation. You know, between you and me, that's a good deal. And of course, we also structure like the value comes in, like how valuable are you compared to this guy? You know, that you're going to deal with too. So it's also the competition that gets mobilized into this. So you have like the money mobilizes your ass in two different ways. You depend on the other and you compete with like-minded, same objective, carrying, exclusionary, either it's you or me, right? You need to succeed, and that's a complicated story, in both vertically and horizontally. And that's going to shape your life. You will spend your whole life thinking, how can I get some space for myself in this kind of pressure cooker? You know, that's why it's also it's an amazingly powerful psychological focus of attention and obsession, of fear, anxiety, of greed. Our best or worst human emotions are in there. They're tied to money as our God and judge. You know, right? But in a smaller way, right? One of the things that's important about money, the exchange, right? You can, unlike barter, you can break up sale and purchase in time and space. Okay? That's the whole idea about money. I can sell now, buy later from somebody else. But in either way, I'm subject to a monetary constraint. I have to sell in order to have the income before I can buy. The whole idea of credit is to turn this around and help you get income before you have earned it in order to earn it. That's the power of credit. That's a power. Right? in that already, it's pretty clear to me that money as a structuring agent is both structuring your time and your space, right? And I'll get into that later when I get to the monetary circuits, which is going to be happening soon. But in the exchange is the social validation. You get income because you're able to sell. Okay, and by selling, it's not just you being a car manufacturer selling your cars, but also as an individual, you have to sell your labor power every day. You have to have a job. Somebody needs to pay you. They just say, okay, João, you're fine. I can pay you. Pedro, no way, out of here. And Pedro is poor. João is not. So that's the exchange. But then we have something else, which is, and that's the space. We are embedded spatially in a web of relationships of exchange. Yes? You get paid, then you start spending. Then those guys get your money and they can do things. Yeah. So it's a web. It's a web, an interdependent web, right? Because if I stop spending here, then it's like also a web with ruptures. Then others don't get money. Okay. But in that web is also a relationship of interdependence and conflict, both. I'm only going to get income if you buy my shit. That's my interdependence. The conflict is that from my angle, it's income. From your angle, it's expenditure. From my angle, it's revenue. From your angle, it's cost. And so we have a conflict over the price. Right? The way we can either shoot each other, that's not very good. It doesn't go very far. Or we haggle, but we can also haggle more elegantly, more productively, faster through contracts. So we have contractual regulation of our relations of interdependence and conflict. We have wage contracts. We have, sales contracts. When you have money, you have contracts. And then you have to have enforcement of contracts by a third party. You have to have a state that can do that. This is a big challenge for many countries, okay? Let's not kid ourselves. They don't have enforceable contracts because they're corrupt states or badly managed states or whatever. Then you don't have confidence, and then it's the law of the jungle in a way. And I hate to sound that way, but you have other types of contractual regulations. Let's put it this way, right? And there's a whole history, a beautiful history, not so beautiful because it's a very violent history of how we regulate relations through contracts, break them, enforce them, and so forth, right? Just in terms of the power structure in the village or whatever, or in a religious, extractor. So I'm going to come back to contracts because this is going to play a huge role in cryptocurrencies. Okay. I'm setting the stage for a discussion of cryptocurrencies. Okay. We're going to have to talk about smart contracts. So we're going to have a new way of organizing contracts. Okay? That's an important part of the story. But there's also the time dimension. It's not just between you and me, but we also in the money idea, we have also like, if I want to get richer, I'm going to have to spend money now in order to make more money later. Okay? That's called investment. And that's a complicated problem because you have to give up money now with the hope that you get more money later. You have to buy machines. you know, pandemic arrives, you have to buy these machines, right? So that hopefully you can convince people to go online to Unicamp online. Right? You don't know how it's going to be. That's the problem with having to, the cost now. The cost is now. The return is later. There's two issues about this, right? Later is uncertain. Later you don't know. But also, the second issue, so there's uncertainty involved here. Very important, okay? Very important. I'll talk to you about uncertainty. But then you also have another problem embedded in this later, and that is that the money later is not worth to you the same thing as the money now. There's something known as the time value of money, from which follow going forward from here to there in terms of compounding, earning interest on interest on interest, which creates a whole money flow curve that's like an exponential curve. But also the opposite. From there to here, you have to discount. You have to discount future money flows to present value. So you can't just compare apples and oranges, okay? You have to compare apples to apples. You have to look at the future and discount it to present value and then compare it with your current costs. The rate at which you discount it is the rate at which you discount it, is your interest rate that you choose. The interest rate expresses here the time value of money dimension. And if it's riskier, if it's more uncertain, then it's riskier, then you have a higher interest rate. This becomes a little problem, for example, when you do climate change. Okay. Climate change is not tomorrow. It's not a problem of 5 years. It's not a problem of 10 years. It's an indefinite problem. How do you have a time value that has an indefinite time horizon? Let's just say 100 years, okay? Or 30 years, if you will. 30 years we may be possible to work with. No, we're not. We don't. Nobody has done investment horizons more than 5. I mean, it's very difficult to do, and it's rare that people do this voluntarily. Remember, Keynes always said, in the long run, we're all dead. But if you have climate change, your long run will be a little faster, and how you die is going to be worse. It has to matter. So if you use your usual financial measure as your discount rate on projects of climate change, you will never do that. You will never do that. You have to impose by regulation a much, much lower, hopefully 0%. You have to, with 0%, you value the future as much as the present. I think you should. This is an essential problem of climate finance. I can tell you that we have not even started to think about much. And by the way, where we have started to think about this, I will tell you a couple of stories on Thursdays, or maybe already tomorrow in the second hour. It's becoming immediately a political problem, a profound political problem. How can you have a private sector think that long term? So you have to have a new public-private partnership. Okay. How you impose a different investment horizon when you do a transition to a different economy. Right? So you have two problems, okay? The uncertainty of the future and the fact that no matter how uncertain, future money doesn't have the same value to you as current money. So look, you're trying to figure out the uncertainty. but the uncertainty is radical. What does it mean? It means that you always underestimate the complexity of scenarios. You always underestimate your path dependencies. You always underestimate the hysteresis of being stuck and going through a process. You cannot possibly imagine all the scenarios, even reasonably predictable scenarios. But you also have weird shit happens that you can never, possibly imagine. So you have what we call fat tail events, or black swan events, right? There's some beautiful work being done, okay, about the idea that uncertainty is not to be confused with risk. But we need to replace uncertainty with risk, because otherwise we don't have any data processing capacity. If you just think of radical uncertainty, you're either going to have to be crazy to do it, or you're going to be so terrified you're never going to do anything. We want to manage it. We want to turn uncertainty into risk. And then manage it. So one thing I have to tell you is, either as a prospect for a career, but also as being a 21st century thinker about economics and finance, okay, development, etc., understand risk management, learn it, get a handle on it, get a job if you want to. We have a whole army of risk managers, okay? An army that's growing. And that has to do with something that's happening as well, that is very profound. Now that's gone. And that's the contracts about time. We'll be organizing in order to make uncertainty less frightening and more like risk. We're trying to control the future through contracts. If I can nail down future payments at a prescribed period moment in time, and the modalities are cleared between you and me, the price is there. Okay, then I can regulate things better. I can predict things better. Right? So we're trying not to do just risk management, but we're also trying to control the uncontrollable, which is the radical nature of the future, as much as possible through forward money contracts. And you have, like, my wage is a forward money contract. Okay, I'm in a union, I get a collective bargaining agreement. I know exactly what the university is going to pay me in 2026. And I can say, hey, 2026, I'm going to be 75. With that money, should I still work or not? And I say, yes, I will. Or something like that. But the university also knows, okay, we're going to have to deal with Robbie Guttmann for the next 5 years, okay? And pay him that much. We could have other jobs. So maybe we should rethink that. And then if they want to rethink it, they come and say, listen, we have other ideas, right? We can buy you out. So we're structuring our own interactions with each other through these forward money contracts. Insurance is a forward money contract, okay? Pensions are forward money contracts. When you try to save for your baby going to a private university and you set up an account for that, that's a forward money contract. Savings, that's like a forward money contract. Derivatives, okay? Derivatives like futures and options are forward money contracts. Potentially one thing in the architecture of cryptocurrencies, because what is interesting here, as you will see, is the architecture of money, okay? You're going to have smart contracts that allow a whole new way of regulating forward money contracts, okay? That's in the architecture that's about to emerge. On the internet. And one of the things that's interesting about cryptocurrencies is that you have already some crazy stuff going on in terms of people making bets on future values, like those non-fungible tokens, NFTs, and you can value titles. Look, I think I have no idea, right? But I can see that when you have like these kinds of contracts where people can just make bets or, assure themselves of payments in the future in a way that is conditional on other things and this and that and this and that and this and that, you can have a very powerful way of reorganizing your social relations and your relationship to time through those digital money contracts, smart contracts. So forward money capitalism is crazy about this in terms of our social relations, okay? Forward money contracts. So there's a whole part of finance, the quantitative finance, or when you have, for example, in the US, you can have MBA in finance, okay? But then you can have a PhD in finance, okay? And there's a few universities. When you have a PhD in finance, you design contracts, okay? And figure out the quantitative, the data, the algorithms, whatever. You're a quant. But you also, you also like a very valuable commodity for financial institutions that have specific issues that they need to crystallize in a forward contract. Okay. So think about it. If you're really smart about math, but math bores you, you want to find something that works, you become a quant. Read about the quants. There's some books. But everybody wants to have forward money contracts that work. And climate change will have a very powerful impact on needing to figure this out fast, because the amount of uncertainty that gets created there is stunning and unprecedented and lasting. It'll last forever. Right? Okay. So where should I go here? Right? Yes. I did talk to you about the monetary circuits, okay? And this was how I convinced the regulationists to let me be part of them. But I don't have that much time, okay? Maybe in the end, if I do have time, I'll get back to it, right? But I already gave you the important things about it, which is that we have exchange at the beginning and the end of a production cycle, as well as a financial cycle. So space and time is integrated with money. Money then structures our space as social relations and our time in terms of money contracts, forward money contracts. And when you have a crisis, these things get ruptured, okay? And when they rupture through a chain. And because you rupture through a chain, that's why you have a crisis that's kind of a very disruptive process. And we just went through the most spectacular set of ruptures that we've experienced in I don't know how long. Maybe since the Black Plague. This pandemic was for 6, 7, 8, 9 weeks. And it kind of goes in different regions in different time frames, which is also interesting. And now it's actually hitting China. They get on vacation to Hainan and they're stuck in Hainan, right? Which is the one place that all the Chinese want to go to vacation to. That's like Florida. Hainan just shut down. Good financial article about it. I can send you that one. So it structures your social relations, it structures time, right? So what the next thing that's important here, okay, is the money form. You're going from agrarian money to commodity money, from commodity money to, which is coins, okay? Then you get to kind of a credit money, which is paper money. And now you go to electronic money and digital money, which is the deeper part of the electronic money. And one of the things that's important, I think, here is to understand that the material nature of money, whether it's metal pieces or just computer bits, okay? The material presence of money, and since it is so incredibly embedded in us, in our relationships to both how we think with each other and how we think forward, right, makes a huge difference. Not just psychological, also how we organize the flow of money. You know, I mean, let me just like, I was with Bruno in the mountains in the middle of really literally beautiful nowhere. We found a place to eat, surrounded by horses, cows, goats, chickens, and pigs. I'm exaggerating a little, but not too much. The guy who fed us wanted to have a transaction in pigs. And Bruno just flashes out his phone, does ding, 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 makes like that, and then shows it to him, and the guy, oh, boom, go, boom, whatever, we leave. Right? Now that's deep. That's a powerful thing. PIX works. That's all it means. It works because it's a new payment system, and it's a payment system that includes that guy up there, for whom the next bank is like 10 miles away, and the internet access is a bit iffy. When the clouds come, forget about it. You understand what I'm saying? Right? That's like pretty deep. But that's the payment system. And think of the payment system, I already made that metaphor once. The payment system is like the pipes and the joints in the bathroom, underneath your bathtub, in the wall next to your bathtub, the stuff that goes to your sink, the stuff that goes to your bathtub, the stuff that goes to your shower, and you go like asleep in there, you turn it on, the water, oh man, I'm awake, right? You never think about the plumbing system, unless it doesn't work, unless something is wrong. And then, how do I fix this? You know? The payment system is the plumbing system, but it's bloody complex. It involves a lot of specialized knowledge getting together. Its construction is pretty complex, and it changes, okay? And it's global. You always want to connect with others. And sometimes it breaks down. And then all hell breaks loose. Okay? And this is going to be deeper problem, deeper issue, but also deeper of opportunity in the age of internet. With Internet of Things. And a whole new way of building markets and price signals among us. You know, we've had the internet only like for 30 years, okay? I'm 71. There was no internet for 40 years in my life. But then I gave birth to kids, they're like 31 and 25. And that's like mother milk for them. They're like in it, you are in it. You're also addicted to it, you know? And it starts changing the way you're thinking and acting. Okay, I'm going to break up with my girlfriend by sending her a text with a couple of emojis. She's going to get it, okay? That's like crazy. When I broke up with my first two wives, it was 8 hours and 15 days of pain. It was so painful that I have not divorced since. I've been married for 35 years in my third iteration. We're not going to, I'm sorry. Yes. So the payment system becomes spectacularly interesting and spectacularly important and spectacularly vulnerable and spectacularly private versus public fight when you get to cryptocurrencies versus digital coins by the central bank. That battle is yet to be played out. There's going to be a battle. And there's going to be different solutions. And there's going to be different power centers doing it differently. Okay? You have one of the great differentiators that we're facing is the change in the monetary system and what that means for multipolar capitalism and the variance of capitalism. Did I make myself? So when we talk about Chinese digital currencies or crypto, it'll be different from the Europeans or the Americans, perhaps, or the Brazilians. PIX is already like, wow, that's Brazilian made, right? That's already a huge thing to have had for the 21st century. Because this convinces the central banks of other countries that CBDCs can work. This is not a CBDC, but it's a major step towards it. So it's like an experiment that has worked incredibly well because it's fast and the efficiency level of the costs goes down to the marginal costs of zero, and they got there pretty fast because of scalability, and the scale is fast. So there's obviously a need for that. And then you have to wonder who's using it for what reason, and you can look at this. So where was I? The payment system is also a key part of finance. And so it goes to this key question about money. The private versus the public. Money is both, right? And it's both in a very deep sense, okay? It's both because it also is the object of gain, of private gain, right? So it has to have this incredible private capacity. I have it, nobody else can get it. If you take it away from me, that's a crime. It's the object of our obsessions in a deep, individualized way, right? So it is, in its essence, has that private element, okay? And it also is a public good, in the true word of a public good. That means it's something hugely socially beneficial. You will not want to exclude anybody from having access to it. Without money, we are much poorer and much more violent than with money. As a society with money, we can regulate things and plan things and divide between individual and together in a way that we wouldn't be able to do it without. It's both. It's both that object of private desire, engine of public good. And we regulate it as such, you know? So I'm going to do this. Yeah, that works. Right. Sorry, it's just like a strange setup. No glasses, masks. You know, didn't think 2 years ago that I would ever have to face that. But it's also very humid today. So, but deeper than that, we have the government, and even the government has somebody separate from it, the monetary authorities, the central bank. So the central bank is not the status of the central bank, both in its connection to the government and its connection to the banking system, is crucial for the governance structure of a country. And also the economic intervention capacity of the institutions in place. But so you also have in the relationship of the monetary authority to the banking system, which now is much more than just banks, the whole financial system, right? That is the private money issue capacity and liquidity provision and credit distribution capacity that creates huge amounts of rents from the profit of the industrial machinery. So finance is a huge organization that extracts part of the surplus value of the society for itself. But it also gives us the ability to spend before we have earned the income in order to earn the income, okay? It gives everybody that uses finance as a funding mechanism the capacity to do more than had they had not finance. Right? Precisely because we are a debt economy already. We're deeply in need of debt. And that can be good if we spend right and make more out of it and then pay it off or prolong it, right? We have become very debt dependent. It's not clear what's the chicken and what's the egg. Whether we become finance-led because we're a debt-based economy, or we are finance-led because we're obsessed with financial investments and financializing. We want to have rich, quick gains as investors or as speculators. And what's beautiful about cryptocurrencies is that it's both. You can see it both, right? And that's the crisis of cryptocurrencies right now. They have a crisis, an existential crisis. This is not just a burst of a crash, right? They need to define what they're about, okay? Because they're both yet. They're a speculative asset. Or are the money as a public good because they have a new payment system that is revolutionarily better than anything else we've had so far? They have an existential crisis because it's a crisis of the definition of their service to society. Right? So let's talk a little bit about cryptocurrencies, okay? I mean, the first thing to understand is the whole industrial revolution of the internet. It's not even an industrial revolution, it's a technological revolution, but it's equivalent to what we had as the industrial revolution at the beginning of industrial capitalism, right? It's a leap forward in how we do things and how we also relate to each other. It's a leap forward. And because of the pandemic, it took like a very sharp leap up, right? We became engulfed in the digital economy faster than we could handle and faster than is good for us, to our own good. So the internet also has become a dark place of hell, both in terms of crimes, future warfare, around the bloody corner, I bet. I'm terrified by the prospect, right, of both the hacking and the cybersecurity aspect and the cyber warfare aspect. And we're just getting there as a problem. Right? I mean, we're going to war with Russia, okay? Russia, they're like the chess players. They're very, very smart, very, very well-educated people that are basically not having good enough jobs. So in the old army, in the old military setup, if you like that, you become a mercenary. Or a trader. You move around. You're going to become a hacker. That's an important comparative advantage of countries that are otherwise under-industrialized and over-educated. I hope I'm not making too many prejudices, but Russia is good about hacking, and they have a strategy about it. And they're going to get desperate pretty soon, because it's a race of time between how much the West can hang together when the economic crisis bites deeper and deeper, the winter comes, versus how much the sanctions that have been imposed on Russia is going to bleed that society into misery so much that they're saying we can no longer continue that bloody war. That's a race of time. But in that race of time, Putin may get desperate. We are in a very dangerous situation because of that. Very dangerous situation because of that. So part of the other aspect from the invasion is we have now we have a much deeper global inflation problem than we should have had and could have had coming out of the pandemic. Coming out of the pandemic, you're going to have an inflation problem. And there's a lot of good about it. One is that we're ending the deflationary period of the down phase that we were under from 2007 to 2020. We're ending that. That's gone. But we also had to take on a lot more debt to get through the pandemic. And now we're devaluing that debt by inflation. It's a collective socialization of losses, okay, through inflation. And that's how you come out of a deflationary period. One way to do it, okay? That kind of crisis. That's how I see it. But because of that, interest rates go up. And now there's a competition who can make them go up faster. That's about to start. Brazil is already like, okay, we're in this competition. They're trying to be already like not get into this, the opposite of the currency war of 2010, right? When their currency devalues too fast. They need to stabilize their currencies in order not to have a currency crisis. Right? And you can do that because you have a commodity boom also thanks to the invasion, and Brazil is a beneficiary of the commodity boom, so they can take a certain amount of hits and get through this. And if it works, Bolsonaro is going to be reelected. That's clearly in his head. And it's possible. There was an article in the Financial Times I sent you, that the Brazilian economy is improving in a very difficult balancing of, an adjustment there. So, but when the interest rates go up, the bubble of the cryptocurrency is going to burst, which is happening since November of 2021. And we're talking about 70% down on average. That's a lot. And we're talking about $2 trillion in losses, probably more. And the losses are young people like you. I teach finance students, and this is a very intense experience for them and for me. And one of the first things that I do is ask them who's into cryptocurrencies. And then, they raise their hands, and then I'm going to go and ask them why and what they're doing and so forth. Right? First hour. Then I'm sending my stuff about cryptocurrencies just to understand, okay, that's how it's going to be. But these are not your white privileged elite kids, okay? These are immigrant kids, brown and black kids, and they're obsessed with cryptocurrencies, and they do it together or against each other. And then you have artists that are obsessed with cryptocurrencies because of NFTs. They think they can get rich through NFTs. By attaching their pieces of art to a token, and then have people bet on their tokens. Right? So in America and also in other places, I might add, this is a global phenomenon, okay? You have young people seriously into cryptocurrencies, so it became a bubble. There is a huge amount of cash out there. The central banks are pumping like unbelievable amounts of liquidity, and it doesn't go all the way to my shoes. Only. People buy dogs, people buy guns, and people buy cryptocurrencies. All pandemic shit. And if you're afraid, you have a dog. If you're more afraid, you have a gun. If you're not afraid, you have cryptocurrencies. Because you better not be afraid. This is a Ponzi scheme. On one setup, it's a Ponzi scheme. There's 10,000 cryptocurrencies out there. 9,800 are to me, are Ponzi schemes. But maybe I'm just too old. You know what a Ponzi scheme is? Carlo Ponzi, one of the greatest financial criminals in American history. Like late 1800s, 1890 or something in Boston, invents a Ponzi scheme. The Ponzi scheme is saying to you, listen, I'm going to guarantee you a 12% return. Give me the money. I go to him. I'm going to guarantee you a 12% return. Give me the money. Give me the money, I can pay you. I find him, and then I can pay. So I'm always promising high returns by getting more and more people involved to pay money for me. Of course, this doesn't go, this is like a geometric series, so eventually it's going to collapse. But in the meantime, you can have money and run, as Carlo Ponzi did. A lot of the tokens, okay? There's different types of tokens, okay? And there's different types of public auctions for tokens that are known as initial token offering or initial coin offering, okay? These are like basically like the first public auction, and then it becomes an auction place. And when you buy into this, you get something. You get a promise. You get that token, but that's like a promise. Okay, it's nothing but a promise that it will be worth more in the future. That's my return to you, right? That I'm promising you, right? And if more people buy in, then your anticipation of it having gone up is gonna be okay, and then you can sell this token to somebody else who's stupid enough to buy it at that point. And now, a lot of these are going to get destroyed. They're not going to survive. Lots of exchanges that organize these auctions are not going to survive. But when you're talking about information and communication technologies, and they become a system of social communication like the internet, or cryptocurrencies, right? These are systems of social communication. There are new games we play, right? Then there's this network externality where more and more people play this game and it becomes profitable. And then it collapses. But something stays, okay? What's important is that you have an experience and you build an infrastructure and you build networks. Out of the dot-com bubble, out of the internet bubble, came those who survived taking over. Google, Amazon, Facebook. They came out of the bubble, okay? Because they were the ones that captured that what is left, the network, the network, the information network. They captured it, and then made a business model out of it. And the same thing is going to happen with the cryptocurrencies. There's going to be something left, which is the infrastructure of it, the architecture of it, and the experience that was had. Right? So it seems to me that a lot of these things go through their bubbles, they burst, and then a rust stays, and it becomes something very different. And this will become the private dimension. It will become the private dimension of digital money. That's not the same as cryptocurrencies. But one of the things that you have to then do is you have to think of what survives here, what's useful here. And that's why there's two different types, there's three different types of cryptocurrencies besides the various types of tokens that are important, okay? They have already social value as money. The others are not money. But Bitcoin, Ethereum, these are actual money. These are actually already embryo forms, embryos of the new digital money. And then stable coins. Okay. All right. These three are different than the rest. And they each have a crucial aspect for digital money. So what I'm trying to explain to you in my own view, as I see it, as I think about it, cryptocurrencies are not money, but they have the embryonic form of the next money, which is the private aspect of digital money. There's always a public-private aspect. And in the previous system, the one that we still have today, you have currencies, that's public, okay? And then you have private bank money in the form of deposits, the checking accounts. And they're integrated with each other through monetary policy by the central bank. And the payment system makes them completely convertible with each other, right? And then the euro currencies came and they made the whole system too private. Because now you have an unregulated global banking network, and then the public tried to bring the public back, okay, by having Basel I, Basel II, Basel III. But now you get digital currencies, you get digital money. That's a whole different public-private ballgame. Okay, we're entering that game. Between the tensions between those two, and the integration that will happen or have to happen. It will have to happen. But I also think that the integration will be different between the different blocks. Between the Europeans, the Americans, and the Chinese. And then it will be also completely local and regional, because you're going to have to get the farmers in those mountains, right? Especially with climate change. You're going to have them hooked to get to some kind of center. Not in a way than before, much deeper. But it also means that they can move differently. Because they have the global financial system in their pocket, okay? In a digital wallet, or in their bloody smartphones that are going to be much smaller than now. So one of the theories that one can have is that the current burst of the bubble allows to see the next future of digital money in the private profit motive way. Okay, but then you're going to have the public side of it. We'll talk about tomorrow. That's central bank digital coins. And then how do you integrate? That's the key thing. That's what you have to think about right now. So what's the special idea about Bitcoin? Okay. That's a pretty brilliant design. Okay. And it's a totally political project. 2008, Satoshi Nakamoto. Ever heard of this guy? Nobody knows who that is. That's already like, let's get born into mystery, not knowing who the parents are, That's actually a brilliant marketing move to get attention and then confidence. Because he also says, it doesn't depend on me. It depends on what I have to offer technologically, social technologically. That to me is already a great move, right? Then he says, okay, I'm going to have 21 million Bitcoins. That's it. And then I think that's the number. So all the gold bugs who worry about discretionary monetary policy, quantitative easing, the government's pumping modern monetary theory by the left wins. They said looking at Bitcoin like gold. That's serious stuff, man. So now you get the gold bugs. Then Bitcoin sets up its own completely separate payment system. I will talk to you about that. And then you get the libertarians, the anarchists. No state here. Anti-state. I don't have to do anything with the state. The privatization of money is complete. That's in their heads. And that's a deep group of people, okay? That's our criminals, okay? But also like ideological, free marketeers, libertarians, right? Ayn Rand, Friedrich Hayek, the Austrian school, the privatization of money. And there's a lot of anti-government sentiment out there. There's a lot of anti-bank sentiment out there. This comes in 2008. That's not a coincidence, okay? You have the greatest banking crisis in a century. And the banks are not just in a crisis, they really fucked it up criminally. You know, the way they set this up. And then they get bailed out and you don't. So this is a political project, okay? This is a political project. You're all vaccinated, right? I'm going to talk without this mask. So this has already, you can see that this has a following, okay? And if you're interested in hiding your money from the government and you're in a separate network, good for you. We have now 180 million daily users in the Bitcoin. That's not a big group, but that's a pretty big group nonetheless, okay? There's a whole counterculture there. This is what I'm trying to make. It's a political counterculture. And that makes it already important as a social phenomenon, okay? It has already a political lobby, okay? And these people are smart people. They're not stupid people, okay? Right? Whoever is in the Bitcoin is part of a pretty smart network. A high-tech network. But then it has this absolutely potentially revolutionary idea of a payment system through a blockchain. So this is a network technology. This is like a cryptographic architecture of setting up a network. And setting up a network in nodes. And the nodes take account of transactions. Transparently, simultaneously. And because of this kind of communication of transactions on distributed ledgers that are publicly available to everybody and they're simultaneously cleared up, you don't need intermediaries. You don't need banks. You don't need somebody in the center who controls all the information, like the broker or whatever. So you have a different type of social networking, right? In that internet space. That's part of what they call Web3, right? So the visionaries of this whole thing see the cryptocurrencies as the engine of a new type of internet that's called Web3, as the third system of the web. And part of the promise for the cryptocurrencies is that they're going to build this step by step, brick by brick, a whole new kind of internet, which they think is going to be deeper and more fair. They think of this as a democratic project, if you will. And it's like part of the youth movement goes there. I mean, that's all I can say, really. Now, blockchains. Let's talk about blockchains. They're a bit mysterious to me, okay? But they're obviously, and this I have just realized in the last few months, they're not democratic, zero rent, fair arrangements. They're controlled, the networks. They're controlled networks by validators. So it's not like that this distributed ledger writes itself automatically. It has to be written, okay? And so it has to be entered. There has to be somebody, a network within that network that are the validators that take account, that are making the distributed ledger work. And they can do it in two ways. Proof of work and proof of stake. proof of work, and proof of stake. Have you ever heard of these things? So this is validators, okay? They're the ones who actually construct and keep and maintain the distributed ledger. They confirm transactions. They get the data and put it out there. When you do proof of work, and here we have to go back to Bitcoin, right? Because that's like what everybody knows about it. Uses up the energy of Switzerland. Right? So when Nakamoto, whoever this group is, right, set a 21 million coin limit, they structured how that issue must be slowed down. Okay, and it must be progressively more slowed down the more closer you get to it. Right? They created consciously congestion in terms of how this gets issued. Do I make sense to you at all? So they're saying you're going to have to work for this, okay? You're going to have to work to get this. You're going to have to like figure out puzzles we're going to give you, which create that blockchain, which create that distributed ledger, right? So the puzzles that they have to figure out with proof of work is that when the puzzle gets solved, it becomes part of the block of the distributed ledger, okay? So you're validating and you're also constructing and expanding that blockchain. But because you have to slow down the issue as you get closer to the wall, these puzzles become more and more difficult. He has a whole pace, right, of how fast the issues can be every 10 minutes, let's say, right? And then he has an algorithm of demand, and as the demand goes up relative to the supply, the puzzles get automatically more difficult. And that means that you have to have more and more tools and means to make those puzzles solved, where you get your bitcoins, right? As a reward. The bitcoins are issued as a reward to the miners. They have first pick on them. The validators in proof of work blockchains are called miners because they're mining the data to construct it. And they're using unbelievable computing power because they're getting more and more difficult. So they're working on in big groups with huge servers spread, across like the city of Sao Paulo equivalent in Nebraska. Totally insane. Of course, this creates a huge amount of demand for electricity at a time of climate change. Not a good idea. This is ecologically not makeable as a blockchain idea. So now it comes to the other one, proof of stake. In proof of stake, you have the puzzles, okay, but the puzzles are not getting progressively more difficult, and you could figure them out, right? And then you accumulate or you buy. You can also buy if you're rich, whatever. You can pile up whatever cryptocurrency you're working for as a validator. And then however many cryptocurrencies are that, they all have their names. There's like thousands of them, right? Whatever. And this, could be Terra, could be Lima, could be Luna, whatever it is, right? And so, but you pick this, you're earning it. That's your reward. You're piling up the currencies, okay, in your digital wallet, and then you can validate as much as you want in proportion. And this is, of course, how you get your gain, right? In proportion to your stake. You have to put up a stake as a collateral, and then they give you a certain space to do your puzzle work, and then you can win if you do the puzzle, and then you get more stakes, more coins. So the rich get richer. It's the richest that control the blockchain. That's the future. That's what's going to survive. And that will take off the blockchain. The blockchain will then become a powerful force. You're going to have a new system of rent extraction by whoever controls and creates a network. There is a powerful network to create. Then you have Ethereum. The idea, this is a huge network. Okay, lots of different cryptocurrencies already integrated in it. And that's one of the reasons why this is special, because it integrates different networks in a bigger space. Ethereum is a big space. Vitalik Buterin, this is like, check him out, the guy who invented that. It's like a tall 19-year-old with pimples. I'm sorry, but it's like that baby is doing this, you know. But he had this idea, and he worked with, I mean, he's a kind of a whiz. And he had a lot of good people working with him, I think, in Stanford. He has this idea of smart contracts, of writing algorithms that procedurally specify different actions contingent on other actions. So I get paid if you do this, right? The moment you do this, I get paid. And the moment I get paid, you know that I got paid. Okay. And you can do pretty complex stuff already, even at this very early stage, right? So you can create a world of forward money contracts, right? That are tied to activities in a complex network sense. So there you don't just have the blockchains in terms of transaction accounting, but you also have like social action programs that come with payments. So that's going to survive. Okay. But you also have a way of connecting different blockchains through what they call bridges. So you already have also an architecture where you can put networks together, separate blockchains. Of course, one thing I know, because I'm sometimes reading in the Financial Times about cybersecurity, both the cyber warfare guys and the hackers that are criminal gang hackers are looking at the bridges all the time, how to break them and how to go in them and how to pretend that you're one or the other. And then stablecoin. Stablecoin is your connection to the outside money world. Because all these other cryptocurrencies, including Ether, which is Ethereum, and Bitcoin, they don't have stable value because they're still very speculative in the sense that people buy, make bets on them and buy and sell. And so they have a market price. Right? And that's not money. That's not money. That's not money. But if you want to have money and you want to have money that is convertible to the outside money, outside of your space there of private digital money or cryptocurrencies or whatever we call it, right? Then you have to have some kind of thing that's a connection between you and that, and that's a stable coin. A stable coin is automatically backed by the same amount of reserves that is valued at circulation. So it's, in that sense, convertible money. And at $1, or let's say one real, okay. Unfortunately, in this crash, key stable coins have been broken. And when they got broken, they went from $1 to 3 cents in 2 weeks. That's a pretty traumatic experience to go through in a crash. Right? You'll see what survives of that. But you're going to have to have some kind of integration of the emerging private part of the digital coin, digital money, into the broader monetary system? That's an open question. Okay. Now, in one of those readings that I put down with Google, whatever it's called, Classroom, right? There's a discussion of stable coins. There's a discussion also of why this still is not money. Right? And nobody has any nobody has any enforcement and regulation as to whether you really have that money backing it. Which raises a question that's very important, okay? Who are going to be these digital coin issuers? What's the role of the banks here? The banks have actually no space in it, naturally. Naturally, the space is with Facebook or Apple. Apple has Apple Pay. That's already a payment system. My son uses it wherever he goes, and he travels all the time. It's pretty global. Now, Apple wants to do Apple Pay Later. That's a step towards banking, where they let you pay later. They're giving you trade credit. Google has also Google Pay. They have other ideas. The question of who gets to issue the digital coins after the crash, right? Digital money. Bitcoin is far too small, and it's a finite project. And it becomes ecologically unfeasible already as it gets closer to it. It has a limited life cycle by design. Okay. The Ethereum is too fragile and too big. It's kind of, because it's connected and has all these crazy smart contracts that we cannot really enforce a verification of. And when they go wrong, there's fights and all that. It's a networking turmoil, systemically turmoil. Okay, and it's very much subject to cyber attacks already. Stablecoins after this collapse have a huge credibility problem. So there's this whole question of how do we regulate cryptocurrencies? That's a very important problem. Okay, and is it going to be regulated globally or nationally? And how do the powers regulate it differently? And how does it relate to the digital coins of the central bank? Right. I think I'm done.